It's going to be a holly jolly Christmas for either Wayne Tinkle or Fred Hoiberg as Oregon State and Nebraska square off in the Diamond Head Classic Championship here on Christmas Day.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Merry Christmas, happy Wednesday, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's right, every single day. Here we are coming to you on the special holiday here. I'm Andy Patton, your host for today's show. I want to remind you all that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Well, we're starting the show talking some hoops. We got to preview the 4 Diamond Head Classic matchups today. We got the 7th place, 5th place, 3rd place, and of course that championship game all coming your way on either ESPNU or ESPN2. So for those of you wanting to watch some hoops with or without your family on Christmas Day, here plenty of opportunities to do that. So we're going to talk about those 4 games. We're also going to talk about my 3 Christmas wish list items for college basketball, things I want to see the sport either do or not do to continue to have the sport be the game that we all love and watch so much. And then we're going to close out the show with a little fun holiday themed kind of game to get us in the Christmas spirit for anybody who's not there yet. You don't have a lot of time because here we are on Christmas Day. We'll start talking about these 4 matchups, all taking place in Hawaii as part of the Diamond Head Classic, the only 4 college basketball matchups on Wednesday. There was no games on Tuesday on Christmas Eve, so it's a slow period right now, of course, for college basketball, for most sports, really, as we kind of, for the most part, allow students and families to be together for the holidays. But some of these folks get to be out in Hawaii. It's not the worst place to be if you're not going to be with your family on Christmas Day. Here are the 4 matchups. I'll just rattle them off real quick, and then we'll kind of go through them. You got Loyola Chicago versus Murray State. That game will be at 1:30 Eastern time on ESPNU. That is the 7th place game. FanDuel favoring the Ramblers by 1.5. Charleston versus Charlotte at 3:30 Eastern time on ESPNU. FanDuel favors Charleston by 6.5. Oakland versus Hawaii, that's your 3rd place game, 6:30 p.m. ESPN2. Hawaii favored in that one as the pseudo home team by 3.5. And then your championship game, 8:30 Eastern on ESPN2. That'll be between I was going to say 2 high major programs. We're going to still say Oregon State's high major. I know they're in the WCC right now, but they're going to be in the Pac-12 soon enough. They're taking on Nebraska. FanDuel favors Fred Hoiberg and the Cornhuskers by 4.5. I will start with the first game here. Bit of a surprise to see Loyola Chicago in the 7th place game. They are 113th at KenPom. We're favored to be in a better spot than competing to not finish last in this event. They started the year 8-0, but have actually lost 3 of their last 4 games. They lost to San Francisco and then, of course, lost their first 2 games in this Diamond Head Classic. They lost to Oakland and Charleston. So haven't seen them have a great couple of days here. We'll see if they can rebound with a win over Murray State. Murray State, the Racers, have now lost 4 in a row. So they're looking to avoid a 5th straight loss. None of their losses are too bad in a vacuum. Charlotte being the worst one, the second game for them in the Diamond Head Classic. They also lost to Nebraska in the opener. Before that, they lost to Western Kentucky and Indiana State. 126th at KenPom, so using KenPom's data, Loyola should be favored. Would be a nice win for the A10 if they can get it here. But yeah, a team that was expected to be in the 3rd or maybe even championship game, and certainly hoping to avoid doing what UConn did and finishing last in this event. Then the 5th place game is Charleston versus Charlotte. Charlotte is a bit of a surprise here. They are 205th at KenPom, the lowest rated team in this event at this point, 7-5 on the year. They needed double overtime to get past Murray State, but they managed to do it, hence why they are in this 5th place game. Meanwhile, Charleston, pretty good in the post-Pat Kelsey era. They started the year off strong. Their losses are all to good teams. They lost to Liberty. They lost to Rhode Island. Of course, they lost to Oregon State in Hawaii. They have wins over St. Joe's. They have a double overtime, very exciting win over Florida Atlantic. One of the best games in college basketball this season. It was a double overtime game. Some incredible highlight reel performances in that one. And then they also beat Loyola Chicago, of course, to get their other win over a top 100 team. They're 123rd at KenPom right now. Favored in this one by 6.5, the biggest line of any of the games. I would expect Charleston to be your 5th place finisher here in the Diamond Head Classic. 3rd place, a bit of a surprise with the matchups here. Oakland versus Hawaii. Hawaii, of course, the home team. So you kind of expect they're going to maybe overperform a little bit just by virtue of playing somewhere they're more familiar. 7-4 on the year. They beat Charlotte before they lost to Nebraska, which is why they're in this 3rd place game. 166th at KenPom. Haven't beat anybody good this year. This is a good opportunity for them against this Oakland team, but Oakland is 199th at KenPom. Hawaii still doesn't have a win over a single team in the top 175. Their best win right now is 185th at KenPom, and that's Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So while beating Oakland wouldn't necessarily give them a big win on the resume, 3rd place finish in the Diamond Head Classic certainly wouldn't look too bad. Meanwhile, Oakland 4-8 on the year, haven't really been able to replicate the success from last year's team making the NCAA tournament. Of course, that big upset over Kentucky. Granted, they lost a ton of players after that season, including Trey Townsend, who transferred to Arizona. 5 of their losses are to top 65 teams at KenPom. They've played a really, really rigorous schedule up to this point. Lost to a lot of really good teams, so they're 199th at KenPom for a mid-major team that's 4-8 is actually pretty good and a kind of indicative of that for them. They also got that nice win over Loyola Chicago. Wright State being their other big win. Again, Hawaii favored here at again in a pseudo home environment for them, favored by 3.5 according to FanDuel. And then your championship, again, 8:30 Eastern time, 5:30 Pacific time for those Oregon State fans. If you can see over my shoulder, I got a home field shirt, Beaver Fever, as an Oregon State basketball shirt. Pretty rarely get a chance to bust that out, so it felt appropriate since we're talking Oregon State hoops here on Christmas Day. The Beavers beat Charleston by 9. They beat Oakland by 6, took overtime to get that win over that Oakland team. The Beavers having a good year, 10-2 so far on the season for Coach Wayne Tinkle after the move to the WCC. They've won 6 games in a row. Their only losses are both by 3 points. One of them was a loss to Oregon at home. They should have won that game. Folks, I don't know if for any of you who watched that game, they should have won it. They had every opportunity, really blew it down the stretch. Would have put them in a much different position if they were 11-1 with a win over a top 15 team in Oregon. Granted, Oregon would not be top 15, but you get the point. Their other losses to North Texas, that was a true road game for Wayne Tinkle and the Beavers. They only lost that one by 3. North Texas is a pretty good team. That's not a terrible loss by any stretch. This team also has a win over UC Irvine, who's top 65 at KenPom. They have a win over Charleston, but those are their only wins over top 150 teams. They're 62nd at KenPom right now, but the resume is a bit flimsy for Coach Tinkle and the Beavers. This is a huge opportunity for them to change that narrative, move to 11-2, beat a power team in Nebraska. This is a big, big chance for Wayne Tinkle and the Beavers to establish themselves as a legitimate contender in the WCC, to finish in the top 4, top 3 maybe, and really challenge to maybe even get an at-large in that conference. Meanwhile, Nebraska, they are the favorite here for good reason. They're the highest ranked team at KenPom. They're 43rd, favored by 4.5 according to KenPom. They beat Murray State by 17, just cruised in that game, beat Hawaii by 14. Haven't had much of a challenge thus far on this road trip out to Hawaii. Nebraska ball off to a strong start, 9-2 on the year. They're already 1-1 in conference play. They had a nice win over Indiana, big blowout win over the Hoosiers. They did get absolutely smacked by Tom Izzo and the Spartans. That was their first road game of conference play. Michigan State just took it to them, won that one by 37 points. Nebraska also has a loss to St. Mary's on a neutral court. That was by 3 points. So only 2 losses for Nebraska, even if one of them was pretty hideous in conference play. They got that win over Indiana. They also got a big win over Creighton, top 60 KenPom team right there. So it should be a really fun matchup. Mikey Rataj, German forward for Oregon State, has been fantastic this season. DeMarco Polo Minor, who they landed in the transfer portal. He's been fantastic in the backcourt for them as well. Meanwhile, for Nebraska, Bryce Williams, just an absolute dude, playing some really great ball for this team right now. I like a lot of players on this team, though. Connor Esijan has been very good from Wisconsin. Raleigh Wooster from Utah. Berke Bayuk-Tunsil is a guy I really like, transferring from UCLA. This is a fun team with a lot of talent that I think can really contend in the Big Ten, and picking up a win here over an Oregon State team that, as of right now, would be a quality win for this team, as a team that's, in that conversation as a top 60, top 75 team in the country. This is a good opportunity for either of these teams to pick up a nice win to close out the year, celebrate the holiday in style, and head back home after that. I'll give my predictions here quickly before we move on to some other fun stuff for today's show. Give me the Beavers winning this one. That's my kind of my boldest prediction out of these four games. I think Oregon State's got the horses to take down this Nebraska team. I understand why Nebraska's favored, but I like the Beavers in this one. Would be a really nice win for the West Coast, a nice win for the WCC. After that, give me Hawaii over Oakland in that home environment. Give me Charleston over Charlotte. I think that one it's a 6.5 point line, and frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if Charleston wins it by as much as double that for that contest there. And then give me Loyola Chicago, the Ramblers over Murray State in that 7th place game to avoid finishing last and really not doing a good favor for the A10 that needs every win that they can get. Well, folks, I got 3 Christmas wishes this year. They're all about what I think college basketball needs to do or does not need to do in order to stay the sport that we all love. We're going to talk about those coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, going to college basketball games during the holidays, it's one of my favorite traditions. I love finding the best college basketball games I can go to, specifically in early December when the winter's rolling around, right after Thanksgiving. I saw Gonzaga versus Kentucky in Seattle. That was an epic basketball game this year. Last year, I saw Gonzaga take on USC in Las Vegas. Had a blast taking my dad to both of those games. And that's what I want to talk about here, because Game Time is really focused on togetherness this holiday season. And that means when you bring people together for live events, the experience is that much better. Plus, using Game Time is the perfect Christmas gift. I've already used it to buy some Christmas gifts. If you're way behind and you need to find some gifts before heading out to your event today, use Game Time. If you're in the LA area, you want to go see Gonzaga take on UCLA, you can get tickets for that game at 1 p.m. on Saturday for just $76 a piece on the terrace of the new Intuit Dome. They also have a super deal with baseline tickets at $115 a pop. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2 here on this holiday edition of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. And I want to share with you 3 Christmas wish list items that I have here for the sport of college basketball, things that I'd like to see the sport do, things that I'd like to see the sport avoid doing to kind of keep it as the sport that we all love. The reason that I know you love this sport is because you're listening to a college basketball podcast on Christmas Day. So we're all big fans of this sport, and there's a lot of things that we may differ in, a lot of opinions, but ultimately all of us want to see this sport continue to grow and succeed the way that it has. For me, number one is certainly going to impact more than just college basketball. It's kind of an NCAA specific thing, but we need more guidelines, more rules, more structure around NIL and the transfer portal. This is an incredibly lukewarm take. This is not some revolutionary thought. This is not some, hot take that other people disagree. Like, the general consensus is there needs to be some level of regulation, more consistency in terms of how they're punishing things, penalizing things, the rules that it's the Wild West right now. And I think many people would disagree with specific fixes. I know some people have solutions of just everybody gets to transfer once. That's it. There's no more transferring after that, with very few exceptions. 5 years to play 4 seasons, but just kind of come back to that hard and fast rule. No more redshirting period. I've seen that out there. Go back to you have to sit out to transfer. Like, everybody's got different opinions on how to do this. And all opinions on this are valid to some extent. I think there are a lot of different potential ways to solve this, but I think we can all agree that the way that it's going right now, I mean, just think about in the last calendar year, the number of things that have happened. We've had lawsuits that changed the rules about eligibility in the middle of a season. I don't think we've really processed how kind of insane that was, that last year at this time, suddenly two-time transfers were immediately granted eligibility just by a judge's decision. Like, that's crazy. In the history of college sports, stuff like that just doesn't happen. And yet all of a sudden we have all these guys who Afton Reed at Wake Forest is an example, the first example that pops in my head, but there's many others who suddenly got eligibility to play for the teams that they had been planning to sit out all year. That kind of stuff happening in the middle of the year. I mean, for coaches, that's so difficult. You don't know what's going to happen. Now we have this lawsuit that just came, or this decision by a judge for a preliminary injunction for Diego Pavia, the the Vanderbilt quarterback, and how that is going to now impact certain players at the Division I college basketball level who have junior college credits in their past, like Michael Ajayi at Gonzaga is one, and Nick Pringle at South Carolina, where those two players could be eligible next year if they choose to come back. At least it's not a decision happening in the middle of the year, but like, come on, like these things happening this arbitrarily and unexpectedly is hard for coaches. It's hard for players. And for us, it's hard for fans. It's hard for fans to kind of keep up with everything. It feels like we need law degrees to just be keeping up with what's going on in college athletics. We have, the amount of other problems we have. We have rule change in the middle of the year. We have players quitting to get more money. We have teams promising players money and then not paying them. We have he said stories about that. We have boosters getting in trouble at some programs, but not in other programs. We have 6th or 7th year seniors keep competing against freshmen. It's just a mess. And I think player autonomy is very important. Players being able to not being stuck somewhere that they don't want to be, having that freedom. It's a capitalist society, like having the ability to make more money doing what you want to do. Like those things are important. But I mean, right now, college athletics is less regulated than professional sports. That just cannot continue to be the case. To me, a solution that I would propose, and it's not fully fleshed out, and we're certainly not going to dive into all of it here, but some level of contracts needs to be the future for college athletics. You sign a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract or a 4-year contract or a 1-year contract. At the end of your contract, you then effectively become a free agent, or you would enter the transfer portal. If you sign a 2-year contract and you want to leave after 1 year, that's the part that I haven't fully figured out, but there needs to be some either a punishment, or I don't like calling it a punishment, but like maybe you have to sit out a year if you're going to transfer before your contract is up. Maybe, whatever the rules could be there, some type of written agreement where, party A says, I'm going to pay you this amount of money to play for our team. Party B says, yes, I will be here for this amount of time. And you just go from there. Like that at least is a start to kind of figuring out some of the chaos we've seen with NIL and the transfer portal and how it has impacted sports. In this case, college basketball on a pretty significant level. Wish number two for me to Santa regarding college basketball would be, don't touch the auto bids. Do not touch the automatic qualifiers in the NCAA tournament. I am willing to accept NCAA tournament expansion. I don't love it, but I've come around to the idea that a small expansion, which is really what they're talking about right now, expanding from 68 to 72, expanding from 68 to 76, it's not even that I'm like excited about it or that I've changed my mind and now want it. It's that I've kind of accepted it is more the way to go about it. Adding some play-in games doesn't feel like it is a dramatic enough change to college basketball and to the NCAA tournament to really get super riled up about it. I don't love it in part because it is continued pushes from Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, and Big Ten commissioner, and kind of leaders of these high major conferences to continue to try to get more of their teams into the NCAA tournament. They're not adding, I've said this on the show and I'll say it again here. This is not going to get Santa Clara into the NCAA tournament, or, Loyola Chicago, or whatever team finishes 3rd or 4th in the A10. It's not going to get 2 more teams from the WCC. It's not going to get another Mountain West team. It's not going to get, you're not going to have a too big Missouri Valley Conference because of going from 68 to 72. At least I don't think so. If that's what they start doing, if those teams start getting a better look, that's phenomenal. I think that's great. But more than likely, it's going to be teams that finished at or below 500 in high major conferences, and it's not going to get a lot of additional mid-major teams. To me, expansion, fine. We can deal with that. It's not the end of the world. My fear is the eventual move by the SEC and Big Ten commissioners to attempt to get rid of the automatic qualifiers, to say, well, we don't want to play Longwood. We don't want to play Robert Morris. We don't want to play UMBC or Fairleigh Dickinson or whomever. And eventually get to the point where every team in there is it doesn't matter whether you won your conference tournament or not. I hate that idea. I think what makes college basketball so great, what makes the NCAA tournament the greatest sporting event in the country is the fact that you have these automatic qualifiers from these smaller leagues. We're not saying that we need to get 3 teams from the Ohio Valley Conference into the NCAA tournament. That's crazy. But we need to get their top team. They deserve to be there. It makes those conference tournaments incredibly exciting. It makes those first round games like it changes the trajectory of these programs. Programs have developed out of making a surprise run in the NCAA tournament. Gonzaga started as nothing. Then they made the Elite Eight in 1999. Then they hired Mark Few as their head coach, and look where they are now. Look at few programs have ever done what they did, of course, but look at, Butler having a couple good years and getting into the Big East. Look at Creighton kind of turning into what they've become. And look at smaller schools like what this has done for Loyola Chicago. They're a great example of a recent team. George Mason goes on that Final Four run. Like seeing those programs be able to have that kind of success after making a miracle run in the NCAA tournament, or even just winning an early season or an early game, is really one of the most exciting things about the sport. And I would hate to see that go away. And then number 3, and I don't know exactly how to do this, but the pacing issues at the end of college basketball games it's just a nightmare. And it's always been true of the NBA, and it's a problem in the NFL right now too, and in college football. It's just when you get to the end of the game and you have replay officials and you have a lot of timeouts remaining, it just drags and it drags and it drags, and it can be hard to watch and frustrating to try to get new fans to follow the sport. Again, I don't know the solution. I'm not opposed to replay review in general. I think doing it at the end of games when you want to get the call right kind of makes sense. So I do get it. I don't know how to make replay review happen faster. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that regard. I think less timeouts could be a solution. You get 4 timeouts per game right now, and then you get an added one in overtime. And sometimes coaches really hoard their timeouts, and the end of games just goes slow and slow and slow. But there's a legitimate strategy to not giving away all of your timeouts earlier in the game. So you can't blame a coach for holding his timeouts and using a bunch of them, when they really need them. But man, it can make this sport really hard to watch. I know every single one of you out there listening to this has had a game where you're just like, wait, can we stop with the commercials? Can we stop with the stoppages in play? It's just really hard at times. And maybe it's less TV timeouts, although that'll never happen. There's got to be some solution, because this is a super exciting, fun sport, and close college basketball games are some of the most fun events to watch. And they really get dragged down by the amount of stoppages in play that we see in the current iteration of the game. Well, folks, it's Christmas. So we're going to have a little fun by making a starting lineup of current college basketball hoopers with holiday-themed names. We're going to get to that in just a second. But first, folks, the NFL playoffs are almost here, and it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many different ways for you to pick up a W. I already talked about this in the first segment, but I'm taking Oregon State not only to cover the 4.5-point spread against Nebraska in the Diamond Head Classic Championship, but at plus 158, I'm taking the money line too. Give me Wayne Tinkle and the Beavs winning this game. If you want to join me, toss a little bit of holiday money down on Oregon State, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. As a reminder, you will get started with $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. So make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, folks, closing out the show here on Christmas Day with a little fun. Went through Basketball Reference, Sports Reference, the college basketball portion of the site, and just tried to find a way to make a lineup of current college basketball players who have holiday-themed names. Just wanted to have a little fun with this. Interestingly, when I actually made a 5-person lineup, it turns out they all worked positionally. That wasn't really intentional. I was just going to pick 5 players and talk about them and their names and how that lineup would look. But we ended up getting 6'10", 6'11", 6'6", 6'5", 6'2" for our 5 players in our starting lineup, and thought, hey, that actually works as a potential lineup. So we'll go through them here, starting with our guard, Lolo Rudolph, who plays for Cal State Fullerton. Rudolph has played in 13 games for the Titans in the Big West. He's averaging just 1.1 points per game, 2.5 boards, and 1 assist. He's playing 18 minutes a game, so not much of a scorer for Mr. Rudolph here, although he's a decent rebounder for his size. He is 3 of 8 from the 3-point line on the season. That's 37.5%. He has only taken 4 2-pointers and has not made a single one of them, so his field goal percentage is a little low because of that. He's 5 of 7 from the free throw line. Certainly not the strongest player in our lineup, but hey, shout out to the Big West, shout out to Cal State Fullerton and Lolo Rudolph. What a great name for the smallest player on our roster. It's very fitting that ended up shaking out the way that it did. Our wings, our shooting guard and our small forward, Krishan Christmas and Michael Christmas. Can't get a more appropriate themed name than that. Krishan Christmas is a guard at Stephen F. Austin in the WAC. In 12 games this year, he's averaging 6 points, 6 boards, 1.5 steals per game. He's playing just over 30 minutes a night. Also not much of a scorer, so we're not going to be relying on the backcourt for a whole lot of points this year. 41.5% on 2-pointers, just 10% from 3, and that's on just about 2 attempts per game. So our guy likes to shoot the 3 ball, not exactly knocking him down at a super high rate this year. Then Michael Christmas is our small forward. He's from Longwood. 14 games this year. He's been very productive for the Lancers, just under 12 points per game, 4.5 boards, a little over 1 assist, playing about 26 minutes per night. Very efficient score, 53.5% on those 2-pointers, about 33% from 3 on about 5.5 attempts per game. So not a great 3-point shooter, but certainly more impactful in that area than our other players up to this point. Moving on to the front court, this is where this team is going to succeed. If this was a real starting 5 at the college basketball level, at the D1 level, I should say, they would be pretty reliant on the 2 players in the front court. First up, from Wright State, we got Brandon Noel playing the power forward position. In 14 games this year, Noel is averaging 19.2 points, as well as 8 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.5 steals, and 1.2 blocks per game. 62.5% on 2-point attempts, 35.5% on 3-point attempts. That's on about 3.5 attempts per game. Noel's played 32 minutes a night, just about 20 points and 8 rebounds per game. He is fantastic. One of the better mid-major players in the country at this point. A guy who could reasonably transfer up. I believe he's still got another year of eligibility. Who could transfer up if he wanted to at the end of this year. Playing some really good ball. Would be would probably be the leading scorer on this team. Although it would be between him and our starting center, Nolan Winter, playing for Wisconsin, only high major player on this roster. Starting for the Badgers this year. He's only playing about 22 minutes per night for Wisconsin in his 13 games, but he's averaging 11 points, 6 boards, and 1 assist. Is one of the most efficient 2-point scorers in the entire country. He is leading the Big Ten with a field goal percentage on 2-pointers of 74.6%, and that's on 4.5 attempts per game. You've watched some Wisconsin hoops this year like I have. He's an efficient scorer around the rim. He's really he's a good scorer from 3 as well, 34.5%. So not elite as a 3-point shooter, but on 2.5 attempts per game for a 6'11" big, knocking him down 35% of the time while shooting that efficiently on 2-pointers. That's a darn good basketball player right there. And him and Noel in the front court, that's a really, really solid lineup. Now, your wings aren't offering as much. Michael Christmas, 12 points per game for Longwood, certainly not bad, but Krishan Christmas, not much of a scorer, decent rebounder, good defender, which I think helps, but that doesn't shoot it much. Lolo Rudolph's hardly playing for a Big West team. So I think you're looking at a team that probably wouldn't actually be all that good. I think it's reasonable to say that, but the fact that we were able to find a legitimate starting 5 with holiday-themed last names here is kind of a fun way to look at this. And a couple players that would be on the bench here, Brente Noel, as a forward from Southern. He's averaging 4 points and 3 boards in 12 games for Southern. And then looking on the women's side of things, there was a couple Hollies, but I thought it'd be fun to have a Holly on the roster. Holly Griffiths was the one that stood out, a forward at Fresno State. She's averaging 3.7 points and 1.5 boards in 7.5 minutes per game for the Bulldogs. Hope you had fun with this today, folks. This is kind of a fun little way to close out the show as we get into the Christmas spirit here. And very soon, we got some really big games coming up. We got the Diamond Head Classic tonight, and then it's a little slow for a while, but then Saturday, got Gonzaga, UCLA, got Utah State, San Diego State, got a bunch of other really fun basketball games. And then after that, we are fully in the thick of conference play. Excited to see how the SEC starts battling each other night in and night out. Who steps up in the Big Ten? Which of those top teams in the Big 12 can kind of separate themselves? Is anybody going to challenge Duke in the ACC? We got all sorts of fun stuff to look at as we get into conference play. So we'll be back with a couple more shows this week, and then we'll get fully into the conference portion of the season starting next week. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic holiday. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. And until next time, Merry Christmas and peace out.